It was the June of monsoon when Aarav, arrived at my mama's home in Lucknow, a three-story Haveli nestled between narrow lanes and wider silences. The kind of home where ceiling fans creaked with secrets and eyes always lingered a second too long. I hadn't seen Ravindra Mama, in 3 years. He was my mother's younger brother, barely 15 years older than me, and the only person in my family who had ever looked at me without judgment. My father always called me too soft. My mother, overly sensitive. But Ravindra Mama had once told me when I was 15, sensitive logon main hai sab sayada himat hodi hai. Those words stayed with me longer than they should have. Now, at 23, I had just completed my master's degree in Delhi. Burnout, closeted, and tired of playing straight in a world that expected nothing less. Coming to Mama's house felt like a retreat, a brief escape before facing a world that neither saw me nor wanted to. The house was full. His wife, Shalini Mommy, a quiet homemaker with tired eyes. Their son, Vedant, 5 years old, always running around with a toy train. Ravindra Mama worked at the district court, respected, married, stable. He was everything I wasn't. And yet, something about the way he greeted me at the gate, shirt sleeves rolled up, eyes lighting up like I mattered, unsettled me. It wasn't improper, just intense. A pause too long, a smile too slow. That evening, after the household fell into post-dinner rituals and scattered yawns, Mama and I sat on the terrace. It had rained earlier, and the air still smelled of wet earth and faraway thunder. "2 coffee badal gaya hai Aarav," he said, handing me a cup of chai. "Aki abura?" I asked, half teasing. "Samaj layak," he said with a soft grin. We spoke of Delhi, of job interviews, of how fake everyone seemed. He listened like he always had, eyes not scanning the horizon but holding mine, as if memorizing something he'd missed. I told him about a friend I'd grown close to, used genderless words, carefully hiding the truth. He listened without pressing. Over the next few days, this pattern settled into place. Morning chai on the terrace. Evenings spent walking through the congested gullies of Aminabad. Sometimes, I caught him watching me when I wasn't looking, long, contemplative glances that made my skin buzz. It was a silent exchange, unspoken but thickening like clouds before a storm. I found myself drawn to his presence, not just for his charm or his voice, but the way he made me feel safe and seen. In a house full of roles, Mama, Mommy, Bhanja, I felt, for once, like a person. One afternoon, while everyone napped, I entered his study to find a stack of poetry books on his desk. Gulzar, Foiz, Nita Fazli. A worn-out bookmark sat wedged between 2 pages. I opened it. Tum sakta, hun to lagda hai jays. Zindagi kishti hai, tum sahil ho. I wasn't supposed to feel what I felt. The flutter in my chest, the quiet longing, the way I now noticed how his shirt clung to his shoulders, or how his laughter warmed something deep inside me. This was Ravindra Mama. My blood, my elder. A married man. But emotions don't follow rules. They slip through cracks, uninvited. One night, there was a power cut. The lights went out, and we found ourselves alone on the veranda, sipping on warm milk. A candle flickered between us. "I'm glad you came, Aarav," he said, voice low. "I am too," I replied, barely above a whisper. There was a pause. Long. A silence that trembled. His hand brushed against mine, accidental, perhaps. But neither of us moved it away. The moment stretched like fabric pulled too tight, one breath away from tearing. I looked at him. He didn't look away. And just like that, something unnamed had entered the space between. This section explores the emotional and physical shift in the relationship between Aarav and Ravindra Mama, highlighting the infidelity, growing emotional dependence, and internal conflict. Section 2. The Crossing. Some lines stay blurred. 700 words. The night after the power cut didn't end with words. We didn't speak of the touch, nor the gaze we shared. But silence can often be louder than admission. The next morning, Ravindra Mama avoided me, subtly but surely. No chai on the terrace. No casual banter. At breakfast, he barely met my eyes. Shalini Mommy remained unaware, gently scolding Vedant for spilling milk on his kurta, while I sat across the table, heart pounding beneath my shirt, as if it had something to confess. By evening, the distance was unbearable. I found him in the study, leaning against the window, cigarette in hand. The room smelled of old paper and unresolved feelings. Kal Rat Jo Hua, I began. He turned, exhaling a slow breath. Kachwabida? That stung more than I expected. But he wasn't mocking me. He looked afraid. I felt something, I admitted, voice trembling. Or Muinahi Patawo Sahi the Agalit. His eyes met mine then, dark, conflicted, and full of ache. I'm not proud of what I felt, he said quietly. But I won't lie. I felt it too. A moment passed. Then another. And then he walked to me, slowly, deliberately, and rested his forehead against mine. It was not lust that pulled us together in that moment. It was longing. For understanding. For relief. For something we couldn't name, but desperately needed. That night, while the house slept, he knocked on my door. I opened it without hesitation. He didn't speak. Just walked in and closed the door behind him. I remember the way he looked, torn, tired, tender. As if he was about to do something that would change him forever. The first kiss wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, shaking, broken in parts, like both of us were learning to breathe underwater. But it was real. More real than anything I'd felt before. The hours that followed unfolded in whispers and touch. No loud moans, no rushed fumbling, just quiet explorations, stolen time wrapped in guilt and tenderness. When it was over, he rested his hand on my chest, listening to my heartbeat as if it held answers. "I've never done this before," he whispered. "I know," I replied. "Me neither. Not like this." But the warmth of the moment couldn't melt the weight that settled on us the next morning. He left my room before dawn. By the time I joined the family for tea, he was back in his routine, laughing with Vedant, reading the newspaper, nodding to Shalini's questions. I felt invisible, like a shadow of the night that passed. But the affair didn't end there. It couldn't. We were too far gone. Over the next week, we found pockets of time. 15 minutes in the guest room, a quick embrace in the kitchen, lips meeting behind half-closed doors. The secrecy only fueled the fire. We became good at pretending, at locking eyes for a second too long, then walking away like nothing happened. But with every touch came a ripple of guilt. Ravindra Mama began to withdraw emotionally. After one particularly intense afternoon in the storeroom, he didn't speak to me for 2 days. When I confronted him, he broke. "This isn't just a secret, Aarav," he said, eyes red. "This is betrayal. Of my wife. My son. Of who I thought I was." "And me?" I asked. His silence said everything. I began to realize I wasn't just a secret. I was a mistake he couldn't forgive himself for. Then came the near exposure. One evening, while Mommy was out shopping and Vedant napping, we lay together in his bedroom. The door, which we always double-checked, hadn't latched properly. A sudden creak snapped us upright. Vedant stood at the door, rubbing his.
"Certainly."
Below is Section 3. The break, precisely 700 words, bringing the story to a powerful emotional resolution. It addresses the exposure of the affair, the internal collapse of both men, and ends with Aarav's bittersweet acceptance and growth. Section 3. The break. Love that left. 700 words. The silence between us became heavier with each passing day. Ravindra Mama stopped knocking on my door. I stopped waiting. We passed each other like strangers, carefully choreographed indifference masking what once felt sacred. But even well-hidden secrets begin to rot. It was a Tuesday evening when everything unraveled. Shalini Mommy had been quiet for days, watchful, suspicious, collecting crumbs we hadn't noticed we'd dropped. That night, she found Ravindra's phone left carelessly charging in the bedroom. A message blinked on the screen. It wasn't explicit, just a sentence from me. Kalteris P. Milna, Agar Bizarat Messes Hodi Hai. When I returned from a walk with Vedant, the air inside the house had changed. Mommy's face was pale, lips trembling. Ravindra stood rigid in the corner, arms crossed like he was bracing for impact. She looked at me once, eyes swollen with betrayal, and left the room without a word. Aarav, Mama said, his voice hollow. You need to leave tomorrow. The finality in his tone knocked the air out of my chest. That's it? I asked, voice dry. No explanation? There's nothing left to explain, he muttered. She knows something happened. I didn't confess, but she's not a fool. I wanted to scream, to beg him to fight, for us, for honesty, for whatever we were. But I didn't. I only nodded and walked away. That night, I sat alone in the guest room, half-packed suitcase on the bed. The ceiling fan spun above me like an indifferent clock, ticking down the seconds. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning. At the train station, he came to see me off. No bags, no disguise, just himself, looking older than he had 2 weeks ago. We stood beside each other as if nothing had passed between us. I'm sorry, he said finally, eyes on the platform. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't, I lied. I hurt myself by expecting more.
He looked at me then.
Really looked. I did love you, Aarav. Maybe not in a way the world allows. But in some way, it was real. It still is, I said, stepping onto the train. That's the worst part. We didn't hug. We didn't promise to write. The train pulled away, and I watched him shrink into the distance, a figure dissolving into the past. In Delhi, life resumed, but nothing felt the same. I walked the same streets, but my shadow felt longer. I tried dating, briefly, but no one's touch felt honest. For months, I carried the shape of him in my chest like a wound that refused to close. Then, 1 year later, I saw him again. It was at a cousin's wedding. The same sprawling lawns, the same awkward family greetings. He arrived with Shalini and Vedant. His wife wore a brittle smile. Vedant had grown taller. Ravindra looked thinner, but his eyes, those eyes, still had the same gravity. We didn't speak until the final evening. I found him near the mandip, lighting a cigarette away from the crowd. Did you stop hating me? I asked quietly. He smiled without turning. I never hated you, Aarav. I hated myself for not being brave. There was nothing more to say, but too much left unspoken. Kya kabhi pyar tha? I asked, needing the closure. He replied. Lekin galat waqt, galat jaga, or galat rishta. His voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. No anger, no tears. Just acceptance. Now, 2 years later, I live alone in Mumbai. I've come out to a few friends. I write poetry, mostly unpublished. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I revisit those memories, not with shame, but with gratitude. Because love, even when it ends in silence, still teaches you something. Closing monologue, voiceover style. Pride ka matlab surf apni sexuality par garv karna nahi hai. Kabhi apni dard esi pyar karna bhi hoda hai. As dard esi, jo humian wo banata hai jo hum hai, pura or zinda. End of section 3. Let me know if you'd like the full script formatted for voiceover/narration or want to turn this into a YouTube-ready faceless video script with visuals and cues.